The year is 2014. The defending champion Seattle Seahawks opened the season at home against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, a team many thought could be their biggest threat in the NFC. Instead, Seattle rolled right over them, as Marshawn Lynch scored 2 touchdowns, and the Legion of Boom looked every bit as terrifying as they had in the Super Bowl just 7 months earlier. Meanwhile, on the other side of the league, the story wasn't dominance but rather doubt. The New England Patriots stumbled out of the gate, and then in Week 4 were humiliated on Monday Night Football by the Kansas City Chiefs, losing 41-14. Brady was severely outclassed by Alex Smith, Jamal Charles ran circles around New England's defense, scoring 3 touchdowns, and come Tuesday morning, much of the national media was questioning whether we had just witnessed the end of the Patriots dynasty. Little did they know, we were actually witnessing the birth of the second one. However, the season wasn't only about the games, but also scandals casting dark clouds over them. Just days before Week 2, TMZ released the elevator video of Ray Rice, who was then cut by the Ravens and never stepped on an NFL field again. But the controversies didn't stop there. Adrian Peterson was indicted for child abuse charges, putting one of the generation's biggest stars on the sidelines for the rest of the season after Week 1. And yet, while some stumbled, one team drastically exceeded expectations. Coming off 3 consecutive 8-8 seasons, with Tony Romo unable to shake the reputation of choking in big moments, the Cowboys had become used to being the butt of every Stephen A. Smith joke. But in 2014, they went about things a bit differently than they had in years past. Behind a young, dominant offensive line, DeMarco Murray ran wild. He ripped off 100 yards in every game of September, setting the tone for what would become one of the greatest rushing seasons of the decade. Suddenly, Dallas was hiding their questionable defense by bullying teams into submission on the ground instead of getting caught in shootouts. So by the time September ended, the Seahawks looked dominant once again, the Patriots looked like they might be done, 2 of the NFL's biggest stars had been sidelined in disgrace, and the Cowboys were relevant as always, but this time for the right reasons. But September is just 1 month of a long season, so October is about figuring out what from September actually mattered. College football weekend is finally kicking off, and I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to make it even better. Right now, new customers can sign up with my promo code BEACHKID, bet just $5 and instantly get $300 in bonus bets. Just put down $5 and you've got $300 to play with right away. Whether you love building same-game parlays, chasing the action with live betting, or planting your flag on a generational receiver, DraftKings has you covered. So don't miss your shot to get in on the action as the season kicks off. New customers sign up now, bet $5 and score $300 instantly in bonus bets with promo code BEACHKID.
What do you think having a 37-year-old?
We're on to Cincinnati. Right now, we're preparing for Cincinnati. We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
And the Patriots, just 6 days after being humiliated in Kansas City, waltzed into Sunday night against the Bengals feeling like an underdog for the first time in who knows how long. Tom Brady threw 2 touchdowns on the way to a 43-17 win, and Gillette Stadium roared knowing that they weren't done at all. This was the first of a 7-game winning streak for Belichick and company, one that included a 43-21 blowout of the Broncos in Foxborough, turning the Brady-Manning rivalry back in Brady's favor after losing to Denver in the AFC Championship the season prior, and with Rob Gronkowski finally looking like his old self after 2 injury-riddled seasons, the Patriots were looking as good as ever. So while New England was making everyone look stupid for doubting them, the Dallas Cowboys were continuing to change their reputation, and DeMarco Murray was chasing a record. Week after week, he crossed the 100-yard mark, breaking Jim Brown's record to start a season, ultimately reaching 8 straight, including 115 yards and a touchdown in a huge win at Seattle that officially put the league on notice. Tony Romo's toughness became part of the story as well, playing through back issues while Dez Bryant was finding the end zone on a near-weekly basis. Despite being a franchise that epitomizes glitz and glamour, it felt like the Cowboys were the most physical team in football. They began 6-1, but a 2-2 November hinted at cracks. In the NFC, though, it wasn't just the usual suspects. The Arizona Cardinals, with one of the best all-around rosters in the NFL, had the best record in football midway through the season. Carson Palmer went down with a torn ACL in Week 10, however, causing Drew Stanton to step in. Yet somehow Bruce Arians kept the team's head above water. Every week, Arizona grinded through ugly games, going 3-4 over the final 7 weeks. But without Palmer, their championship hopes were non-existent. Meanwhile, in the AFC, Peyton Manning was still putting up huge numbers, but the shine was starting to fade, and he didn't look invincible anymore, while his successor in Indianapolis was putting together the best season of his young career. Andrew Luck's Colts were explosive, hanging huge numbers on good defenses like the Bengals, and it looked like a changing of the guard in the AFC could be happening right in front of us. Then there was J.J. Watt. October and November were the peak of his potentially MVP campaign, where he broke the rules of what a defensive player could be. Pick sixes, strip sacks, even lining up at tight end to catch touchdowns. Every week he added another highlight to the reel, and every week the question grew louder. Could a defensive lineman really win MVP in a quarterback league? Though he would ultimately settle for Defensive Player of the Year. And Pittsburgh had a pair of superstars gunning for Offensive Player of the Year. Antonio Brown staked his claim as the successor to Calvin Johnson as the league's best receiver. And for as great as DeMarco Murray was, Le'Veon Bell became the NFL's premier dual-threat back. At the end of October, the Steelers' offense caught fire, dropping 51 points on the Colts, then 43 on the Ravens. Big Ben threw 6 touchdowns in back-to-back games, with Brown and Bell catching 4 of those 12. The Steelers weren't always consistent, but with that trio, they looked like the NFL's best offense at times. However, a rookie wideout in New York was stealing all of the NFL headlines. Odell Beckham Jr. missed the first month with injury, but when he finally hit the field, he was unstoppable. His breakout came in November, particularly against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, when he made what many consider the greatest catch in NFL history. It was the moment OBJ officially introduced himself to America. By the end of the year, he'd piled up over 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns in just 12 games, shattering rookie records and injecting life into a Giants team that otherwise stumbled to a 6-10 finish. And in the rest of the NFC, the race tightened. The Eagles were hanging around with Nick Foles and later Mark Sanchez somehow keeping them alive. The Lions had a top-tier defense with Ndamukong Suh wrecking pockets and Calvin Johnson still dominating whenever healthy. And the Seahawks, after a 2-week mini-slump with losses to the Cowboys and Rams, got back on track and rounded into the dangerous form that had defined them. By the end of November, the NFL had taken shape. The Patriots were rolling, the Cowboys were just awesome, and the Cardinals were effectively eliminated. Watt was redefining what a defensive player could do, but it still wasn't clear who was the best team in football. And come December, the playoff race was crowded, but the league's heavyweights began separating themselves from the pack, especially Aaron Rodgers. Back in September, fans in Green Bay were panicking after losing 2 of the first 3 games, and Rodgers famously told everyone to
RELAX.
By December, that speech looked prophetic. Rodgers was operating at peak efficiency. In Week 13, he shredded the Patriots defense in a 26-21 win that was a potential Super Bowl preview. A week later, he outdueled Matt Ryan and the Falcons in a Monday night shootout. Rodgers would finish the year with 38 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions, cementing himself as the NFL's most valuable player. But he wasn't the only one hitting another gear. In the final 6 games of the season, the Seahawks defense allowed a total of just 39 points. An outrageous stretch that reminded everyone why the Legion of Boom had dominated in Super Bowl 48. Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas were everywhere, while Bobby Wagner's return from injury stabilized the front 7. On offense, in Week 16 against the Cardinals, Marshawn Lynch ripped off a 79-yard touchdown that fans instantly dubbed Beastquake 2.0. The defending champs finished the year 12-4, snatching the NFC's #1 seed. So the road to the Super Bowl went through Seattle. But the rest of the playoff bracket was forming in its own chaotic way. No team embodied that better than the Carolina Panthers. Sitting at 3-8-1 in late November, they looked completely finished. But Cam Newton gutted through injuries, the defense found its stride again, and Carolina ripped off 4 straight wins to seal the NFC South crown at 7-8-1. With a losing record, they didn't seem like they belonged in the postseason, but the Panthers had momentum. The Detroit Lions finished 1 game behind the Packers at 11-5, but with their ferocious front 4, combined with Matthew Stafford and Megatron, the Lions looked like the kind of team built for January. But controversy followed them into the postseason. Ndamukong Suh was suspended 1 game after stepping on Aaron Rodgers' leg in Week 17, only to be reinstated on appeal, making him available for the wild card round. In the AFC North, the Bengals once again found themselves in the mix, but the story felt all too familiar. Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis got the team into the playoffs for a fourth straight year, but the questions around whether they could really accomplish anything meaningful in the playoffs remained. Rookie running back Jeremy Hill provided a spark, and the defense held its own. But a Week 17 loss to the Steelers cost them the division crown and set them up for yet another daunting wildcard matchup. As for the Ravens, their season had been a roller coaster, but John Harbaugh's team found enough grit to sneak in at 10-6 and third place in the AFC North. Joe Flacco wasn't spectacular, but with Terrell Suggs leading a defense that still carried some of its old menace, Baltimore entered January with the look of a wild card nobody wanted to see, built for cold weather football with the experience to back them up. Together, these teams filled out a playoff bracket that was as deep and unpredictable as any in recent memory. Some were elite, others were flawed survivors, but in December of 2014, they all punched their ticket to a postseason that was set to be one of the most dramatic of the decade. Wildcard weekend opened in Pittsburgh, where the Ravens marched into Heinz Field and stunned their rival Steelers. Without an injured Le'Veon Bell, Pittsburgh's offense sputtered, and Joe Flacco once again morphed into January Joe, throwing for 2 touchdowns and keeping his excellent playoff reputation alive. But the Cowboys, with their first division title in 5 years, faced the Detroit Lions in a slugfest. Late in the game, Matthew Stafford launched a pass to Brandon Pettigrew, who drew a flag for pass interference, only for the officials to pick it up. The no call swung momentum, and Tony Romo delivered a clutch touchdown to Terrence Williams to seal the win. But the following week would bring even greater playoff controversy. Meanwhile, in Indianapolis, Andrew Luck carried the Colts past the Bengals, who blew it on wildcard weekend once again. It was Cincinnati's 4th straight one and done, cementing Dalton and Marvin Lewis's reputation for playoff futility. And in Carolina, the Panthers, with their losing record, took advantage of Ryan Lindley's historically bad performance for Arizona, easily advancing to the divisional round, where we got some of the most memorable games of the decade. In Foxborough, the Ravens and Patriots staged an instant classic. Baltimore jumped out to not one, but 2 separate 14-point leads. Each time, Tom Brady answered. The defining moment came when Julian Edelman caught a lateral and launched a perfect 51-yard touchdown to Danny Amendola, the kind of backyard trickery that only Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels would dare call in the playoffs. The Patriots survived 35-31. In Green Bay, the Cowboys met the Packers in the cold, and the game produced one of the most infamous plays in NFL history. Late in the fourth, with Dallas trailing, Romo lofted a bomb to Dez Bryant on 4th down. Dez soared, grabbed it, and stretched for the goal line, only for the officials to rule it incomplete after replay review. Dez Caught It became the rallying cry of Cowboys fans forever. The Packers escaped the game 26-21, with Rodgers gutting it out on one bad calf to keep his MVP season alive. Out in Seattle, for 3 quarters, Carolina hung around, but in the end, the Legion of Boom slammed the door, and Cam Chancellor delivered the exclamation point, intercepting Cam Newton for a pick-6 that sealed the win. And in Denver, a torch was officially passed. Peyton Manning looked old, stiff, and broken as the Colts stormed in and dominated the Broncos 24-13. Andrew Luck threw 2 touchdowns, and it was only appropriate that he was the one who ended the elite version of Peyton Manning once and for all. And that set the stage for the conference championships. In the NFC, Green Bay went to Seattle for what became one of the wildest games in NFL history. Rodgers and the defense built a 16-0 lead, and it looked like Seattle's reign was finished, until they hit a fake field goal touchdown to give themselves life. Then the onside kick, where Brandon Bostic botched the recovery, Seattle pounced, and suddenly the unthinkable was happening. Marshawn Lynch later rumbled in for the go-ahead score. Jermaine Kearse, who had been targeted 5 times to this point, resulting in 4 interceptions, caught the winning touchdown in overtime. Seahawks 28, Packers 22, one of the greatest comebacks the sport has ever seen. But in the AFC, there was no such drama. The Patriots humiliated the Colts 45-7. Brady threw 3 touchdowns, LeGarrette Blount scored 3 more, and the game was never in doubt. But in the aftermath, whispers began about deflated footballs. By the next morning, Deflategate was a full-blown scandal, tainting New England's victory. Even so, the stage was set. The defending champion Seahawks had survived by the skin of their teeth. The Patriots, left for dead in September, were back on top as well. Super Bowl 49 was a collision of dynasties at the height of their power. On one sideline stood Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, back in the championship for the 6th time, chasing redemption after a decade without a title. On the other was Pete Carroll's Seattle Seahawks, the defending champions led by the Legion of Boom defense that had humiliated Peyton Manning just a year earlier and were looking to do the same to the other aging all-time great. The game itself lived up to every ounce of hype. Brady came out fairly sharp aside from an early red zone interception, orchestrating quick drives, leaning on Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski. But Russell Wilson also settled in, and Marshawn Lynch bruised his way through New England's front. And Chris Matthews, a receiver no one had ever even heard of, suddenly turned into Randy Moss, hauling in multiple bombs down the sideline. The first half ended in a 14-14 tie, but in the third quarter, the Seahawks seized control. The defense rattled Brady into a second interception, Wilson found Doug Baldwin for a score, and Seattle built a 10-point lead. For most teams, that would have been the knockout punch, but this was Tom Brady. Down 24-14 in the fourth quarter, he delivered one of the finest stretches of his career, leading 2 surgical touchdown drives, one capped off by a touchdown to Danny Amendola, and the other to Edelman. With just over 2 minutes left, New England had taken the lead 28-24, but nobody thought the game was over, and sure enough, Wilson marched the Seahawks downfield. With less than 1 minute to go, he uncorked a deep shot to Jermaine Kearse. At first, it looked incomplete, batted away by Malcolm Butler, but in one of the wildest catches in Super Bowl history, the ball bounced off Kearse's legs and miraculously landed in his arms as he rolled on the turf. Seattle had the ball at the 5-yard line, down 4 with time to hand it to Marshawn Lynch multiple times. But the ending is burned into NFL history. Lynch bulldozed to the 1-yard line, setting up 2nd and goal with 26 seconds left. Everyone in the world expecting one thing. Instead, Wilson dropped back, fired to Ricardo Lockett, and Malcolm Butler jumped the route. In an instant, the Patriots had won the Super Bowl, and the Seahawks' dynasty dreams died on the 1-yard line. It was one of the most shocking, unforgettable endings not just in Super Bowl history, but in all of sports. The celebration was pure euphoria for Tom Brady. After nearly a decade without a title, after being declared washed in September, he was a champion once again, hoisting his 4th Lombardi trophy, and tying Joe Montana for the most Super Bowl wins by a quarterback. Belichick had cemented his legacy as the greatest coach of all time, and Malcolm Butler, an undrafted rookie no one knew a month earlier, had delivered a play that would be replayed forever. For Seattle, it was the beginning of the end. The decision to throw at the goal line fractured the locker room. Richard Sherman, Marshawn Lynch, and other veterans never got over it. Within a few years, the Legion of Boom was dismantled. Lynch was retired, and Seattle never made it back. But for New England, it launched the second act of their dynasty. The Patriots would go on to win 2 more Super Bowls in the 2010s. And then there was the controversy that lived on. The Patriots' blowout of the Colts in the AFC Championship had birthed Deflategate, and in the weeks after the Super Bowl, it became the biggest story in sports. Goodell launched an investigation, and instead of celebrating one of the greatest games of all time, the league spent the entire offseason embroiled in scandal. Brady would eventually be suspended, but the Patriots only grew stronger in the years that followed. Looking back, the 2014 season stands as one of the most dramatic of all time. It had everything: scandals, breakout stars, legendary comebacks, devastating heartbreak, and a Super Bowl that ended with a play so incredible, it changed 2 franchises forever. Thank you for watching, and if you love the NFL in the 2010s, check out my video recapping the entire decade.